Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome back to the Wisdom Circle. We had a summer pause, and so we are really excited to kick off the fall post-Labor Day with a dear friend, highly successful executive, Alvaro Saralegui, and my partner, Tony Ponturo, as always, sitting right next to me, kinda virtually. Alvaro is currently working as the co-founder of DangerTV, which is a free advertising-supported streaming platform. Everybody's heard about fast channels. In fact, Alvaro, you can talk to this in a sec. Once Tony gets to say hi and I stop talking about, I guess I turned on the TV the other day and Samsung TV now has all the David Letterman shows and the history of David Letterman shows, which is like, wow, this is not a horrible thing I would need to get out of immediately. So I guess people are really working on content. But let's go to Tony first, and then Alvaro, we'll just roll into talking about what you're doing and your journey and all the things that brought you to, the very successful place you sit in today. So, Tony.
Yeah, well, Alvaro, thanks for being our first guest after our summer break. Thanks to our listeners and watchers who were patient to let Ray and I clear our heads and enjoy the summer a little bit. We missed the podcast ourselves. Some of you actually, more friends and family probably let us know that they missed the podcast. So yes, we're going to continue on with the guests like Alvaro. So we appreciate your support. It's important to us that we're not just talking into the air or talking to ourselves. And as Ray and I said, I think from the beginning that we would probably learn as much as anyone else through this process. And so even though we thought we knew a lot, being in the business a long time, we learned much, much more on every podcast. So that's our level of expectation, Alvaro. You're going to educate us and our listeners and watchers, and you've had a unique career. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Ray. But Ray, I would make one comment, and probably Alvaro, when you do it, is to sort of when you talk about Danger TV, actually explain what it is, because I'm not sure all of our listeners probably know what it is. So. So give that background as well. But with that, I'll throw it back to you, Ray.
Sure, thank you. And for all of our listeners and viewers, tell all your friends about Danger TV too, because it's a tough marketplace out there. Lots of inventory. Alvaro and I shared a lunch and we talked about how it's crowded. It's crowded out there. And so, Alvaro, let's turn it over to you a little bit. I think first let's talk about Danger TV, and maybe we work our way back into other topics that'll come from that. So please educate us.
Well, we launched the company in 2012. We had just sold a company, QR code business that we had invested in and participated in. We thought, hey, maybe this mobile thing is going to really take off. So we got lucky, and people started using mobile phones, and QR codes took another 10 years, but they're here with us now.
Oh, yeah.
And the origin idea really came from watching me with my kids, my brother with his kids. We all are big NFL fans. As you know, I worked at the NFL for a long time. I actually went to high school with the commissioner. And so we're very, very tight as a family, as fans. And while we were killing time waiting for the NFL games to start, we would just be, looking at cable, and we were watching the similar shows, The Two Families. And we called them men's reality TV. It was, whether it was a fishing show or a history channel show on war, Shark Week, that type of stuff. And we thought, that's interesting that both families and two generations, because we were watching it with our kids, found this interesting. So we jotted down the shows that we watched, and we went to friends of ours at Nielsen and asked them, how well do these shows do versus the other shows on the same cable channel? So they said, okay, we'll get back to you. And they came back to us and they said, interestingly, the shows you handpicked are the best rated shows on those cable channels. So if nothing else, it shows we are like everybody else. So that's
Very average person.
I'm a pretty average guy. So nice to have that out of the way.
Right.
But we thought, okay, well, that's interesting. That it's almost like back in, and I'm not going to date myself, but when I bought records to save money, we would buy anthology records that would have essentially best hits. So we essentially had chosen the best hits of these, different channels. So we thought, why isn't there a channel that does just the best hits? So you don't have to watch the other stuff. And that was how we came up with the thought of Danger TV. And the reason we came up with the name was that was the common DNA these shows had. There was always some type of danger in them. And it's everything from, survival to Coast Guard rescues to, border seizures in London airports. Because people will think Danger TV, your brain, if I don't give you any background, tends to go one place or another, depending on your own biases. Like, oh, it must be about high adrenaline sports. That's what Danger TV would be. And we have some of that, but it's not really that. It's like 7 different types of dangers, the ones that I just sort of rattled off. And we launched it as a website. It was doing okay, but just sort of fledgling. And then out of nowhere, in the like 2019, Samsung TV called us, and Ray, you mentioned it earlier. They said, "Would you be interested in streaming your channel with us?" And the interesting thing was that, as you guys know, social media was taking off, and these are 3 to 4 minute clips. We had half-hour shows to an hour, hour and a half long documentaries. We were in a way, like a fish out of water because we had very long content. But if you're streaming, that's actually the content they wanted. So they came to us, said, "Yeah, we would like that." We said, "Okay, great." And we went to MIPCOM and NATP, essentially conferences where you buy content, and tried to persuade these guys that we were trustworthy and they should trust us with their content. But we weren't going to pay licensing fees. We were going to do rev shares, which was sort of key to the business. Therefore, we didn't have to invest any cash. And I say that as a parenthetically, just so your audience understands a little bit of the business model, and not just the content that we're creating. And therefore, if you're doing well, your partner does well. If you're not doing well, your expenses aren't going up; they're going down because you're not, rev sharing. So anyway, that was the model. Other distributors started to see how we were doing, and we got one after the other. Vizio, these are OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, basically TV set guys, who became, as Tony and Ray, you both know well, they became somewhat the gatekeepers where cable companies used to be. And so we were now part of this universe. And basically it was 2 large groups, if I was to divide it. One was FAST channels, which is, the acronym is FAST, Free Advertising Supported Television, essentially the television that we grew up with. And then the others were subscription services, and that's Netflix, Disney, etc. And the 2 were sort of lived, commingled, and your listeners, our consumers, could choose between buying some subscriptions or just watch stuff for free on things like Tubi, Samsung, etc.
And just to clarify and put a point on it, again, for those who might be hearing things they know, but it's all it comes on your television. If you buy a smart TV, your smart TV comes loaded with the ability to buy subscriptions, and a lot of them, they pop up. They're on your remote. Like, I think we have I don't know what a remote is out here, but I can just hit a button and go to Netflix. I don't even have to go to pick a channel. So they're smart. And so I guess you were kind of in a really nice strip of great content. And a lot of them kick off with their own platform. So Samsung is the first thing that pops up, or Vizio's network, or whoever. How big? Because you're right, in terms of the gatekeeper, like they're the last inch, right? You talk about the last mile. The screen on your wall is the last inch. How many? Like, what's the network size of those groups? If they were to say, if you come in, you can buy. How many homes can you reach now on smart TVs?
I don't have, yeah, I don't have the exact number, but there are more. That market is now bigger than the cable business
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
as far as distribution. It just gives you a sense, and I think cable just dipped below 50% of
Right.
U.S. TV of TV households.
Right.
So it's it's quite large, and also when I made the distinction between the subscription services and the ad services, a huge change about 2 years ago was that the subscription services started selling ads. So now everybody is selling ads as well. So it can get a little confusing. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that I just want to make sure that you understood that distinction, because you can say, well, wait a minute, Netflix is now taking ads, and you'd be right. 3 years ago, they weren't.
Yeah, they've all
Yeah,
gone.
it's sort of like, everyone finds that, even the NFL Red Zone now is going to put in little small advertising. So it's sort of a test to us, the consumers, which is if the distributor, in the broad sense of the word, can find another revenue stream and there's a tolerance for it, it will find its way in. And it's only us, the consumer, that will push back. So it is interesting to see, watching a little bit of the NFL game on Prime, Prime last night. There's commercials, which is a streaming service. So, and I heard from a traditional movie distributor that people like Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV really don't need the studios anymore, because they, if Alvaro has an idea to do a movie and the script is written, they in a sense, they have their own production house, and they don't need the distribution system because they are the distribution system. So it's sort of interesting. On that note, Alvaro, just a question on that. Speaking of that, so you talked about there's existing content that you're doing a business arrangement with, right? And it's a rev share. Does that exist? So if Ray and Tony have an idea and say, we want to bring it to Alvaro and we're willing to accept your rev share, is original content something you're looking at as well?
Generally, being very honest, not that I needed to caveat my comments with that.
You're lying on the wisdom circle.
Yeah,
There's no lie.
this time I'm telling the truth.
You and Bob Arum.
We couldn't afford original content, right? It's millions of dollars, and that's part of the business model where, and I won't get into too much detail, but essentially the idea was, if there's a movie or a documentary, because all of our stuff is non-scripted, there's a documentary and it wins an Academy Award,
Right.
very hot. 2 years later, it's still, let's say it's Solo climbing a mountain. It's exciting. It's evergreen content. You could watch it 5 years from now. It's still very cool if you hadn't seen it. And don't forget, the distribution of documentaries is limited. So in a country of 330 million people, what, 200,000 saw it, or a million? So that leaves 320 million that haven't seen it. However, that content is now in that company's drawer because they launched it, they premiered it, it got distribution, and now it's kind of done. A few continue to have lives, but otherwise not. So they're just collecting dust. So we come in and say, hey, that thing that you're not using, we'll take it. And it's literally pennies on the dollar versus, going back to your question, Tony, original content that you would have to pay if you were going to make it yourself.
Yeah, and not to redo your model, I was suggesting that the producer, not you, said, I'll just make up a number. I'm going to risk $500,000 to make this. You like the idea. Ray and Ray and Tony are going to go fishing in the Amazon, and I'll take the risk. I'm going to hope that the rev share, and how you don't have to share with us that arithmetic, will make up that 500 plus. So
Yes.
it really wasn't your risk, it was the producer risk. So we don't have to belabor the point, but that was where I was going on the.
I see, and we have done one or two things similar to that, which was like a co-production essentially.
Yeah.
So yes, but we're obviously very careful, tiny company with cash flow. So the amount that we are willing to put at risk up front is limited. But yes, I get your point. The other, a quick tangent you might find interesting is that we produced our first promos, because obviously we're cranking out promos to get people to watch, 100% with AI.
Nice.
So we invested no money other than the amount we have in both Gemini, which is Google's version of one that's better known, ChatGPT.
Right.
But we used both, and it was an explorer named Shackelford who got stuck in the Arctic and on. But it's exciting, danger, and the characters are invented. I mean, so you're not paying actors, you're not paying writers, you're not flying down to Antarctica.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife used to work on the Mercedes-Benz account, and I don't want to tell you how much they spent showing a car going down the Pacific Coast Highway.
Yeah.
Tony, I know you're very aware of those expenses.
Well, it's very interesting, and and clearly, sort of getting in a little bit your background, you've always been sort of an observer of the consumer, which is in a way what you did here, which is in your time at Sports Illustrated, and obviously you were advising the NFL, I think, to expand their audience to the Latino community. You're really an observer of the broad spectrum of consumers, not just obviously the Latino community. But what have you seen? I'd be curious from the days you were working with the NFL and working with Telemundo, specifically to the Latino community, and how has it's changed over, say, the last 25 years, if you were advising people today? And then how does that then fit maybe into Danger TV as well?
It does. Interestingly, essentially it's just follow the numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, the NFL, it was at a cocktail party that Roger asked me, "What do you think of?" Essentially, along the lines of the same question you're asking, Tony. How do you see this? Because we think there might be an opportunity. And first of all, I said, "Why are you asking me?" That's racial profiling.
Right. That's why I was being careful the way I asked the question.
No need to tiptoe here.
Italians can get by with, talking to Cubans, it's okay.
No, the reason well, first of all, my family was involved. I have a cousin named Christina. She had the number one. She was like the Oprah. They used to say Oprah con salsa. She was a big star. She spoke at Obama's Democratic convention. And the last name is Saralegui. So people associate us with media. My brother, I explained, I had a sister who was also there. She ended up launching PanAmSat, satellite company that covered all of Latin America and then the world. So the family's known sort of in these circles. So that's essentially why they said, "Hey, would you be interested?" I wanted to do entrepreneurial things too. So I said that I ended up doing the consulting gig. And
Yeah.
but what we learned, essentially, we just spent money on research, and we just saw the numbers were huge, for a number of Hispanics, but interesting differences in the audience. One is, for example, is that I'd be curious to see how you guys answer this question, but are your sports favorite teams, which is favorite team is key for the NFL, more important than anything, that you have a favorite team. How did you choose the favorite team? And FYI, the punchline for the country is people tend to pick what their parents watched, and in the old days tend to be what dad watched, and that became your your favorite team. Hispanics, it's the opposite. The kid picks the favorite team, and he educates the parents.
Mm.
So it's
as opposed to the World Cup, where they're born
right.
into their favorite team.
Well, and for the NFL is really specific, but yeah,
You have to pick one. You're
but
right.
for soccer, for example, that's there. The parents know it, and the kids follow the parents. But when the parents aren't really familiar,
right?
But the kid wants to be accepted. He's in elementary school. All his kids are talking about the Packers. He becomes a Packer fan, and then goes home and tells his dad, "Oh, let's watch this Packer game," and explains it. So it was things like that that we would uncover. So how you would market would be very different than how you would for the typical audience. The other thing is disproportionately young, the Hispanic market. So it's not just growing fast, it's growing fast in the right areas. And that was the other thing. I feel
like I'm back at Telemundo. That was my story for 7 years. The one thing that scared me when I was at Telemundo was anytime I'd get in an Uber or a cab or anything, and if I could tell, not racial profiling, I would just, talk to the guy and see his name. And I would say, "What's your favorite sport?" And it went from soccer to basketball, NBA, and NFL. And it's exactly what you said. It's that kind of, I want to be part of, I want to learn English. I want to be part of it. So and then we'll get into some sociology. So when Tony asked you about all that, I was wondering about where you see the Spanish language consumption going in the United States as everyone's trying to learn English, as we have bigger problems that we want to talk about today as it relates to welcoming everyone around the world to come to America. So, I know that Telemundo's struggling. The numbers that they were getting when I was there now it's a long time ago, which is scary. So what are you seeing as trending in terms of total Hispanic viewing, Spanish language viewing?
Yeah, I'm not as close to it now. Yeah. I left the NFL in 22. I mean, consulting for them. Yeah, so it's been a while. But I think everything you said is true. The amount of, and I think the clamping down on immigration isn't going to help, because those are people who obviously Spanish is their dominant language. But if you want to fit in the United States, speaking English is important. Other than perhaps Miami, Florida. There's a few exceptions.
You better speak Spanish. I lived there for 6 years, so I know how important
that. Yeah. But I'm saying, other than a few areas in the country, it's how you become part of the community and speaking the language, learning the culture, and if it's a sports culture, following American sports is the way it goes. I interestingly, just because we had this experience in Hispanic media, me by accident, my brother by design, we launched DangerTV in Spanish. And it's somewhat surprising. It's in Spanish primarily. And again, this was Samsung coming to us originally and saying, "Hey, we'd like to launch you guys in Mexico." So we said, "Okay, great." So we did that. And we have another large television set manufacturer who we just signed a deal with. We can't announce it yet, but so there's multiple people. And we are distributed by Roku in Spanish. The amazing thing to us was that our Latin America, U.S. Hispanic distribution, by Hispanic I mean Spanish language, was as large as our Vizio distribution in English.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it shows
the country is Hispanic and 80% not.
Right,
you're getting the same numbers.
Yes. So that was a real eye opener for us. And a lot of people say, well, that's aggressive to launch an Hispanic division, blah blah. But obviously for us, it's something that we know. So we felt comfortable, and all we really had to do was go to the same guys that are giving it to us in English and go, "Do you have it in Spanish?" Then and then ask Samsung, or whoever, put it on. It wasn't a heavy lift. To someone who's never done it before, it's a foreign language. It can sound like a nightmare. So
Well, that's what that was my lucky charm of going to Telemundo, is like, it's not that hard if you
right.
understand media and the business. That it's really kind of more technical,
Yes.
right, than anything else.
Yeah. Although, Ray, let's not tell anybody else that, because otherwise their appraisal of us is going to decline. It's real hard.
You need like serious chops to make that move.
Well, and you guys are obviously much closer, but those same young people advising their parents about the NFL 20 years from now are going to be the parents. This whole element of consumer behavior and the mix of all of our authenticity is really evolving and changing to where what's even going to be the fit necessarily of Spanish language, because all these young people are bilingual. So how will that? There was an article today about, speaking of Mexico, Liga Mex, which, as Ray knows, I do some advising on the advisory board of Voit, which is a Mexican company, which the soccer balls and volleyballs, etc., who are going to reintroduce themselves shortly into the U.S. But some of the advice is some of the young people's team is actually a Liga Mex team, or Liga Mex in general. And now there's talk about, well, in 5 years, will Liga Mex and MLS merge? So that's a lot of 30,000 feet at this point. But, and maybe being a little out in front, Ray talking about what's going on in this country, and not to get into that. But I remember when I was at Anheuser-Busch, Alvaro, and Ray's heard too many of these stories, but when the government wanted to tax beer, right? And that looks easy. Well, let's just tax an excise tax of 15% more on beer. We would remind them the rippling effect, what that meant. So if sales went down because of excise tax, which would more than likely be passed on, talking about tariffs, then the rice we bought, the aluminum we bought, the glass we bought, the people we hired in the farms for hops, that would all get reduced because we would need less ingredients. And, sometimes the headlines don't, and I even think the decision makers don't think through the rippling effect of a decision, so let's move migrants out of California back to Mexico. Ask Modelo how their beer sales have happened because of that, or other products like that. So all of this is all connected. So following the consumer, my wisdom circle connecting dot is really key. And, I think you have a great example here, how your personal observation of your family's viewing habits reflected ultimately what was probably viewing habits of others, which you then made into a business.
Right. That's well put.
There's a lot to be said for research, and I continue to believe that. So there's a perfect example. So I think it would be good to kind of journey down the Alvaro career path, just because there's a lot of folks who want to know about someone who, Hispanic marketing consultant for the NFL. And by the way, he did not act like a consultant. He acted like a full-time employee. He negotiated a bunch of deals, and everyone was rough, but we got through them all with a smile. And the Super Bowl, which was one of the great moments for Telemundo. Alvaro and I worked together in the advertising business so long ago, we forgot that we worked in the same company at the same time. We just never crossed paths. And so give us a little bit. And I talked to you once about a guest who went a little bit longer than needed on the journey, but would love to hear, your journey. Because I think that so many kids growing up, and I'm just doing this a lot lately live, want to know where they're going to wind up. I was at your college doing a convocation speech, and can you tell me how I can? No, I can't really tell you anything. It's not because I don't want to. I don't know what your journey is going to be, because you got to start taking it. And when you start taking it, you'll find out what it is. So, how did yours unfold is the word I was looking for.
Yeah. what I'm thinking, given the wisdom circle theme, is why don't I'll mention, let's say, a job that I did, and then one story that sort of that your audience, especially the younger ones, might say, "Oh, that's interesting." Hopefully they might learn from it. I would say, first of all, a lot of football players, when they retire, they'll say, "What do you miss most?" And they say the locker room. And I would say that's probably true for the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Mm-hmm.
locker room, our office, our coworkers is what kind of made it a very special place. There was the business challenges and the rest of it, but it's the people, and that I can't underscore it enough. So I started at Benton Bowles. There, I'll mention one quick story, which I think it was interesting. I was asked, and I was in a 10-month media training program, and I left after 10 months and a day to another company. So it was. I thought I think I know what I need to know, but I contributed along the way, and you knew so little. We were felt totally irresponsible. I had I think a TENS, which is like we call them Brampers. It was Pampers for older people that I had to market, or you had to buy media for. So these were big companies. I mean, Benton and Bowles had some of the biggest packaged goods companies, General Foods, etc. But so the senior guys one day called me into a meeting, and they said, "Hey, we P&G has come to us, and they have an article they want published. So would you come up with a media plan for this article?" And so it was like tool and die manufacturing was just something not fascinating, but I understood the goal. So I started to look, and I was like, well, first of all, this is an article; it's not an ad. So you can't put the same article in 10 magazines that are competing with each other. So like a week later, we get together, and these are, again, the senior media guys, and they were like, all right, let's see the media plan. I go, I don't have one. And they were like, a mistake. I then explained, if it's editorial, put your mind in the head of the editors of these magazines. If it's going to appear in this one, in your competitor's book, you're not going to print it. So it's not like running an ad. And after that meeting, I was getting all sorts of calls from all these different guys asking me, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And meanwhile, the meeting was with very senior people. And the wisdom circle, I think, takeaway is your youth and fresh look at problems is very valuable. And you don't have the experience of the older guys, but sometimes that experience makes you or forces you down alleys that are very well worn, and you aren't going to think outside the proverbial box. While if you're young and you're looking at it fresh, you'll have that perspective. So that was a very just one little anecdote from my Benton and Bowles days.
That's a great one. No, we've talked before about not with as good an example, but you got to take a risk there. You're like the new guy who's wanting to impress his senior managers with his brilliance of writing a media plan or being in the media training, and you say, "Yeah, I don't have a media plan." That's courage too.
Yeah, it was a little scary.
There's something to be said about that, though. So there was a show we just started watching. I won't go into the details. Although it is a hybrid of, it's actually on a streaming service that we pay for no ads, and it had ads. And so I'm having like, Peggy, what's going on? And apparently there are some shows that get accepted by a streaming service where you're on a subscription, but you got to see the ads. That's another story. But it was about two lawyers. One told the truth to the boss, and the other one just wanted to tell the boss what the boss wanted to hear. And the conflict there and the courage it takes. And unfortunately, in this particular show, they fired the guy who told the truth. But I do think that courage and believing in your freshness and your point of view, that's a great moment to hammer home that you didn't waver. What did you go into this meeting not having a media plan, saying, I don't know, this might not have been the best move I've ever made? Like, what was your feeling? Because I think a lot of folks who might hear and listen to us and watch might never want to do that because everything is so tenuous these days and hypercharged and everything. So when you sat down there to tell your senior managers that the media plan they asked you to write was not written because there's nothing to write, I just love to know what you were feeling right then, because it's really brave.
Well, there was an expression back in those days called a CLM, which is a career limiting move. So that's kind of what I thought I was stepping into. But there was, in a way, there was no risk because the answer was so clear.
Wow,
You know,
that's cool.
and if they sat down and gave themselves the same question and they had to do it because they were just essentially, hey kid, go do this, right? They eventually would have come to the same conclusion because you couldn't do it, right? You can't hand the same article in 6 magazines. So, but let me jump. I don't know how much time we have. 2 quick ones that I think.
We got 10, 15 minutes. We're good.
Okay. One
Wait,
one.
I got 35. What do you got?
Well,
45.
we started at about 9 o'clock. It's 9:45, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, no, we didn't start the show at 9 o'clock. Okay. Get back our rhythm once we've done a couple of these.
And this one is I'm saying more for the laughs. The second one will be not quite as funny, or I think it will be. Which was when I was interviewing to get my job in sales, in magazine sales. A friend of mine worked at Sports Illustrated. He said, "You should come work over here." I was working at a very small publisher, but making a lot of money. So I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. But anyway, so I started. And once I got the interview with SI, I then went to other magazines, as you can imagine. But this is back in the day before emails, right? This is, the early 80s. So the question was, how do you keep how do you stay top of mind to the people you interview with after you leave the office? You can't email them. You can call them, but what are you going to say? And maybe it's one call. You're not going to call them every week. Right. So it's a conundrum as to how do you stay in touch and stay top of mind? Because, every day another kid is coming in and interviewing. And how do you differentiate yourself? Right? Like a unique selling proposition back in the Ted Bates days.
Yeah, USP. Yeah.
So what I came up with was, I don't know if you guys remember this thing that everybody in the ad business read, was called the Gallagher Report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was essentially, it was like, you had to read it. And it was like a pithy, witty take weekly on what's going on in the ad business. Fortunately, Gallagher has the same number of letters as Saralegui. So I came up with the Saralegui Report, and went to an art store and got the same graphics that Gallagher used, and started putting out the Saralegui Report after every interview that I had. And I would write like a pithy thing like, Saralegui makes cold calls in Windy City when I went to sell in Chicago. Or, when I realized I'd succeeded was when I went to like my 3rd or 4th interview at Sports Illustrated. One of the secretaries had put up on the bulletin board the Saralegui Report. So everybody who walked in that office was seeing the Saralegui Report. And the problem I had was the problem we all have had in that same situation. How do you get remembered? How do you stay in their face? But you don't want to be obnoxious. You can't be too in their face. And so you had to come up with a device. And there, the message is think hard and be creative. Now, we all have different amounts of creativity, understood. But if you try and come up with things other than what everyone else is thinking and just give it some hard thought, that's really what's going to distinguish you from other folks. And again, going back to Wisdom Circle, your younger guys, they're going to go, how am I different? Here's an example of a way that I was different. And I ended up getting the job at SI, and there was no job. They hired me because they were seeing all the guys like from Money Magazine, Condé Nast that I was interviewing with. So it was like more they were being told, look at all these other guys that are looking at me, and they're like, oh shit, we better get this guy. But there was no job. I ended up, being an assistant of the souvenir program for the '84 Olympics, running events because they had no job for me. And the one key thing of that was they were like, Alvaro, we need 100 guides for all of these 2,000 guests like Tony Ponturo that we're taking to the LA Olympics. And so that bright idea was, let's hire a sorority from UCLA and they can be the guides. And it worked. So,
as you might imagine.
Well,
What's interesting
Alvaro,
here,
that is just great advice, because I know Ray and I both, I should speak for Ray, but young people say, how do I do what you just said? And it's a tough question to answer. I think that's brilliant, because I know I always say, the only one waking up in the morning worried about you is you. The person you interviewed with, your boss, wherever level you are in business. They're not waking up every morning saying, how am I taking care of Tony, Ray, and Alvaro? You've got to be the one to take the initiative. And I think at all levels, people say they sort of expect, okay, it'll happen organically, and it just doesn't unless you do something.
So there's a thread here that I want to hit on, which is, I'll tell one quick story because we all tell stories. It's part of how wisdom arrives. It bubbles up, right? But you had an entrepreneurial background, your grandfather and your dad, and that's an entrepreneurial stuff, right? And I think that, Tony, I'm sure you have one, so we'll save a little time for that story. My first day in advertising, I was at Ted Bates. They had stuck me in a conference room while they fired the person I was replacing who had called in sick on Friday, and she had to clear out her cubicle. And they were trying to make Monday morning coffee, and they didn't have a coffee opener. And I had just come back from like a cross-country trip, and in my wallet, I had a camping coffee opener. And so, I said, I can help you open that coffee. Well, I got to tell you, I had like 14 friends that day on my first day because I helped them make their Monday morning coffee. So sometimes it presents itself. Sometimes you have to think up a Saralegui report. Tony, back in your, either page days or first agency job, did you have some moment that was different, not just being handsome and charming and smart? Was there a...
Well, it's interesting because I'm a big believer in being honest and trustworthy, and I think that's important. And so I'll try to tell this quickly. So when I was a page at NBC, you would have an assignment to give tours and work the first Saturday Night Live, which I did. There was a page also, which was the assignment no one wanted, to be where you would sell the tickets. They come up these big steps, sell the tickets. Turns out, sadly to say, that one of the pages with the non-page who took the tickets had a little scam going, which is 10 people came up, don't worry, don't give them a ticket, just take the money. And then they would split the money. When I would do it, the woman who was 28 years old never approached me because I think she just figured it out. And so the head of the department said, whenever you're in the box to sell tickets, everything's always, 0 to 0, it's fine. Anyone else in the box, it's all off. Would you take 2 weeks to be in the box to I figure this out? Long story short, they found out the thing. And what it said to me is, obviously be trustworthy, be honest. I think I brought that to the business side, and I used to see it, believe it or not, when Ray and I were at BBDO. In those days, 3 agencies had the networks. BBDO, I think, had ABC with Pepsi, someone else had something. And I would watch these buyers lie about the CPM of where they were. And it would really bother me, which is like, why don't you just tell them where you are or where you need to be? But they would play this game, and then they would sort of get lost in their lie or their embellishment. And I just said, that's just not how I want to negotiate.
Well, or get caught, because I was at BBDO when someone did that and they got caught red-handed where they had told ABC a number And then the guy said, "This is the Bob Aaron." I'm like, "Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" And that was a career limiting moment for that person, who I will let remain nameless. But you're exactly right. And I always used to say, I'm just not smart enough to lie. You got to remember too much stuff.
Well, and I would tell the young people not to get into, the craziness of business. When I was teaching at NYU in Columbia, I said, I dealt with them all, FIFA, IOC, the big networks, big broadcasters. Not once did anyone say to me, what do you want out of this deal? And I said, you know why they never asked me? Because they knew I never asked them for it, right? That wasn't my reputation, And so I said, decide who you want to be from a moral standpoint, because you're going to go a lot longer. Because if all of a sudden you ask for something, right, I now own you, right? And so you're no longer your own person. So that's a whole segment about being trustworthy and honest.
And we will do that. As we're going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, Alvaro, I want to give you, a chance to either ask anything or talk about anything or close up what's been like a really fast, I don't know, Tony thinks we've gone longer than I have. It's gone fast for me.
No, I didn't see the red dot. I'm sorry, Ray. That was my fault. I was looking at the real time versus the red dot. That was my fault.
Trust your buddy. But anyway, it's really been great having you. Any closing thoughts or anything that you would say to the youth of America who might be listening and people who just want to learn from Alvaro?
Well, one that I want to underscore what Tony said, because he was held in extremely high regard throughout Time Inc. For the reasons, because he is who he is. And that's important, because what would happen is, and I won't name the AB's competitors in the day, but you would slide towards AB because here was somebody that you could trust. It was a good person, so on and so. So the human interaction and who you are is as the most important thing I think you can have. So I'm echoing Tony's comments, and he's the embodiment of it in many ways. I'll leave you with one story, which was in my I was general manager at SI, mid to late 30s, so a relatively young age, and I would have a human resources reported into me. I had a line out the door of guys like 25 to 32, and they would all come in and they would say things like, "Gosh, what can I do to help you?" I'm but it was kind of like this vague stuff. After a while, even I picked up on the pattern, and basically what they were saying is, "How do I get your job?" That's really what they wanted. So as I then started to cut to the quick when they would come in, and I would say, appreciate it, love your openness and wanting to help, but what about your career? Because it seems to me like that's more. And these guys were salespeople; they were very good, but like at Time Inc., it was hard to get a job there. You needed to know somebody. So all of these guys were Ivy League guys. Their parents knew somebody, and they got in, right? So they hadn't really gone way out on a limb, and they were smart. I mean, but how do you, there's 40 of them, right? How do I distinguish myself?
Yeah.
And that was at the core of their question. So I said, you have three choices. And then they would go like, oh shit, this is great. Here's the answer. I said, one is you can be better than everybody else. And already I could see them getting depressed because, oh shit.
What's the other question?
That's not good.
Yeah.
Number two is you can get a mentor. Somebody handpicks you because of something you did that was terrific. You're trustworthy, you're honest, you're good, you're a hard worker, and whatever it is. And if it's luck to a degree, but if that happens, you can get plucked out of the one of 40, and all of a sudden it's a little different. So they were like still a little depressed because they're like, what are the chances? And you can't pick your mentor. The mentor kind of picks you, and blah, blah, blah. So I go, and then there's a third option. And they were like, oh, great, here's the answer. And I go, the third option is you can take a risk. And then they were like, oh, no, because these guys never took a risk in their life, right? And I told them, I said, I know what you're thinking. That's not what I wanted to hear. But don't forget, this is the second grade, third grade problem. When you were in second grade, you didn't think, what do I want to do next year? You went to third grade. But now that you're 26, 27, there is no third grade. You have to decide, what you want to do. And at that age, and it's mostly men that would come see me, and they're 28 to 32. They are thinking about getting married, thinking of a family, happy that, they're working at Sports Illustrated. It's great at cocktail parties, but in their heart of hearts, when they go to sleep at night, they're like, yeah, but I'm one of 40 guys, and my dad's the CEO of some bank. I'm not on the trajectory I need. I said, so you have to take a risk. So I said, for example, we're launching a new magazine called SI for Kids. We need an ad director for that. Throw your hat in the ring. We don't have a lot of people. It's a monthly, which is a very small business versus a weekly like Sports Illustrated. But now you go to the ad directors meetings with all the others. I mean, it changes the game a little bit. But if the magazine fails, then you go to the back of the line. So do you want to take that risk? And they all walked out at sort of like, oh shit. None of the choices were great.
I think it's going to go much better than this.
But that's why there's only so many people that succeed, because it's right. A lot of things have to line up. And so anyway, that I think is those three things. And I can think of a fourth, but let me cut myself off. That when you're starting your career, or you're trying to decide how you differentiate yourself, it's not easy. So, work like crazy, see if you can get mentors, and think about taking a risk, which might.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say this out loud. I think you might have. So we've been trying to have some fun titles as we go further along. I think the title of this, I'm going to throw it out there, but Tony and Ramon get to reject it. But there is no third grade.
Yeah, right.
That's good.
What are they talking about? Alvaro, it's been really great. As much fun as I thought it would be. I hope you enjoyed it. Tony, I'll throw you a last comment. I'm going to just say wonderful to be back on the circle.
Yeah, Alvaro, as we said at the beginning, we'll probably learn as much as anyone else, and you did not disappoint. It was very great stuff. A really great perspective, particularly for the younger people, and also taking the risk, which is where you are now, Danger TV. And what's interesting is you've sort of proven out, and probably Ray and I as well. It's not a straight line, right? It's sometimes we sort of went from here to here to here to here, and then you look back. And Ray said it earlier. I can't tell you what your journey is until you start taking it. And it's easier for us now that we've taken that journey to reflect back how we got to where we got. But in many cases, it was taking risks, and so, again, thank you. It's great to see you again, even though it's through this crazy screen, and good luck with everything, especially with the Danger TV.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on your success. I listen every week and look forward to your fall lineup. Thanks, guys.
Great.
Thank you.